All right, happy Wednesday to everybody out there. Good afternoon. Welcome into your first Alert Hometown Weather Show. I'm your host, meteorologist Tanner Brammer, and we've got some activity on the way for later today. Now, it's going to be the first time that we've seen a little bit of a stormy environment here in quite some time. We had that one little severe weather outbreak back in March, but has been a pretty quiet, severe season so far. Now, we're still not expecting a severe outbreak for today, but could be a couple of storms on the stronger side later this afternoon and into the evening. And that's the first thing that we'll be talking about and giving you the first alert on in your first alert hometown forecast. But after these storms move out later today, after the cold front sweeps all the way through, we're going to give way to some much cooler weather for tomorrow, and then those temperatures will swing right back up going into Friday, and especially this weekend, and that's really what we're looking forward to, especially if you're a summertime fan. We'll be talking about 80s and maybe even 90s returning to the forecast as soon as Sunday. And even this morning wasn't really quite as cold as what we saw yesterday morning. A lot of those lows more into the mid to upper 40s, even had a couple of low 50s here and there. But as of right now, we've warmed up significantly since then, currently sitting at 74 degrees, and the city of Roanoke, several hometowns now well into the 70s, right on par for where we should be for the beginning to middle parts of May. 74 in Danville, 75 in South Boston. Then obviously toward those typically cooler areas, you're more into the mid to upper 60s. Now, taking a look at the town of Blacksburg right now, students gearing up to graduate here over the next couple of days, seeing a little bit of some cloud cover start to filter their way into the area. We will see a good bit of some cloud cover here for the next couple of hours, and I'll explain why here in just a little bit. But current temperature is 68 degrees right now in Blacksburg. Roanoke obviously a little bit warmer, but you look off in the distance and we're kind of in the same boat here in Roanoke. More and more and thicker cloud cover starting to make its way into the region. 74 degrees right now in Roanoke, and winds a little breezy out of the west and the southwest at about 15 miles per hour. Now, you notice much cloudier up toward Hot Springs and up toward the Allegheny Highlands. In fact, I think I may see a raindrop or two on that camera lens. We're not 100% dry right now. We do indeed have a couple of showers making their way into parts of the region. Now, this isn't the main band of activity we're expecting with that cold front. This is actually way ahead of that front that's still draped through the state of Ohio right now, but some showers ahead of the front and ahead of tonight's activity. Not all that unlikely, especially if you are up toward the north half of the region. In fact, in Roanoke, I wouldn't be surprised if we maybe see some sprinkles here over the next hour or so, but the best rain chances through about 3 or 4 o'clock will be along and north of the I-81 corridor. But here's a look at the system as a whole. There is one severe thunderstorm warning in the western portion of New York, and you can see where that front is and where that actual line of storms is associated with that front as well. Now, obviously, that cold front is going to make its way further and further southeast, eventually through our region later this evening, and that cold front will be the main sparking mechanism to bring those storms into the area. So kind of timing out the rest of your afternoon and evening. Temperatures today looking pretty comfortable, right around average before that cold front blows through, and we are going to cool down going into late this evening and overnight tonight. Rain chances specifically, probably not all that likely here anytime soon unless you're seeing some of those showers as of right now. But the main band of storms, which is more what I'm showing here, will be most likely anywhere, I'd say from the 4 to 6, maybe 7 o'clock time frame for most of the region. A little bit earlier toward the west, a little bit later toward the east, again, just depending on where you are in the region. Now, as we take a look at those impacts that we're expecting for today, as I mentioned, we're not talking about any severe outbreaks expected, but a couple of these stronger storms could pack some gusty winds, maybe 45, 50, even 55 miles per hour in a couple of cases. Now, we're not really expecting a flooding threat simply given how dry the grounds are, even with that rain that we saw on Monday, but this is simply just indicating that, especially in some of those more urbanized areas, areas that have a lot more roadways, we're not ruling out that some heavy downpours could lead to some ponding here and there, because do keep in mind that asphalt cannot absorb water nearly as efficiently as soil. So if you're driving around in Roanoke and you do run into a heavy downpour, again, maybe take it a little bit easier on those roadways, slow down a little bit, and remember, do not drive through a flooded road even if you think you can get through it. But as far as that large hail or that tornado threat go for the rest of the day today, they're going to be basically zero. Not really much to worry about in that department. But temperatures later tonight, after that cold front moves all the way through, it's going to bring in some much cooler air behind it. And so a lot of lows tonight might be a little bit cooler than what we woke up to earlier this morning. With a lot of lows tonight down into the low to mid 40s, could even be some upper 30s here and there. Now, you're noticing on this specific graphic a lot of storm icons. Those are the same storms I was just talking about. Those are the storms that we're expecting late this evening into the early parts of the night. But I'd say after about midnight, we'll see those skies clear out and give way to drier weather. Now, going into your Thursday, it is going to be a lot cooler than what we've seen the past couple of days. Highs tomorrow are going to struggle to get out of the 50s in a lot of hometowns. In fact, in Roanoke, we may not get above 58 or 59 for a high, and especially up toward those higher elevations, maybe not getting out of the 50s either. New River Valley, talking about some low to mid 50s, could be a stray sprinkle here and there. Might not be a 100% dry day, but definitely a lot quieter in the precipitation department compared to what we are going to see today. Winds a little bit breezy out of the northwest as well, and now up toward the Allegheny Highlands, kind of the same temperature range as the New River Valley, topping out in the upper 40s and low to mid 50s as well. Could be a couple of stray showers here and there for you guys also. Now, further east, your rain chances are obviously going to be lower, basically zero for a lot of you over toward the Piedmont, and you're actually going to be a little bit warmer. That's because the winds, I don't think, are going to be quite as bad for you guys, so your temperatures could very well top out in the low to mid 60s. Same case does go down towards south side, especially down towards South Boston, down towards Charlotte Courthouse, down toward Halifax County. Could top out in the mid 60s for a daytime high, a little bit more comfortable for you guys. But as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about some breezy winds after the front blows through tonight, and those breezy winds are potentially going to last into the day tomorrow. Winds out of the northwest gusting anywhere from about 25 to 30 miles per hour. Nothing too whipping that we're expecting, but you definitely will notice a breeze in the air, especially tomorrow afternoon. And with highs only into the upper 50s and low 60s, it is going to make things feel quite cool outside. So if you are doing anything outside tomorrow, whether it be tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon, wouldn't be a bad idea to have a light extra layer with you. But the winds obviously aren't going to last forever. We'll see them calm back down as we head into tomorrow night, and that's going to give way to a much nicer stretch of weather going into the day on Friday. Temperatures kind of all over the place here over the next several days. In fact, tomorrow looking like the coolest day that we'll see for quite a while, maybe even for the rest of the spring season and into the summer. As Friday, we'll be right back into the mid 70s, low to mid 80s expected on Saturday, and then Sunday we are going to be feeling like full-fledged summer. We're going to see a rapid increase in those temperatures, potentially into the 90s for a couple of hometowns, and that does include the city of Roanoke, and we could be talking about our first multi-day stretch of some highs in the 90s for the first time of 2026, just in time for the middle part of May. But the main story obviously will be for this evening with those storms moving through. As I mentioned, nothing too damaging that we're expecting, but could be some gusty winds here and there. Now, whether they're going to be straight line winds or rotating winds, spoiler alert, it's going to be straight line winds. That is still to be decided, but it is looking like straight line winds that we'll see. So be sure to stick around, and after the commercial break, I'll take you through a deep dive of what the difference is between those straight line winds and tornadic winds and what we can expect to see later in the day today. All right, well, as mentioned, we are expecting a few storms to make their way into the region today. We're not expecting anything quote-unquote destructive with those storms, but could be some gusty winds here and there. But whether they're going to be straight line winds or maybe the potential for some tornadic winds is further explained in this deep dive into comparing wind types.
All right, well, with some storms on the way later this evening, you might be wondering whether there's any type of tornado threat or not with a couple of those storms. And the short answer is no. We're expecting more in the form of some straight line wind gusts with a couple of these potentially stronger storms. And the reason that we're expecting straight line wind gusts is because they're usually produced by more of a linear form of storms, which are usually sparked up by some type of frontal boundary making its way through the region. And in today's case, it will be a cold front. Now, in some extreme cases, you can have straight line wind gusts up to close to 100 miles per hour. Luckily, that's not going to be the case today. The storms aren't even going to be close to strong enough for that type of power. But little to no wind shear is needed for more of those straight line winds. But you compare those to tornadic winds, and it's a little bit of a different setup. Instead of a linear form of storms, it's more produced by supercellular storms, which we don't really see all that often here in the mid-Atlantic. And it's those supercellular storms and those rotating winds that are much more commonly the origin of tornado development, and that does require something called wind shear. Now, in case you're wondering what wind shear is, well, essentially it's just a difference of wind profiles, both in the form of direction and speed as you head further up into the atmosphere. And you can break it down into two different categories. The first category will be directional shear. You can have two different wind directions when comparing those surface winds and those winds aloft. For example, if you have winds coming out of the southeast down close to the surface, but out of the southwest or even the west up aloft about 5, 10, 15,000 feet, that's when you have that significant directional shear. And then speed shear, kind of the same thing. You have calmer winds at the surface and much stronger winds up aloft. And when you combine those two things in a stormy environment, that's when that tornado risk increases, and that's kind of one of the main sparks of a potential development of a tornado. Like I said, calmer winds at the surface, stronger winds up aloft, and you get that rotating column of air, or what we call vorticity, in the weather world. Now, in any stormy type of environment, you also have that rising air, or what we call convection, so you can have that column of air kind of rotate to become more in a vertical fashion, and so that spinning column of air more in a vertical fashion now forms into a wall cloud. Now, in some cases, you can have that wall cloud start to drop down, and that then becomes a funnel cloud. And if it continues to drop down further and further until it reaches the surface, that's when you officially have a tornado. Now, like I mentioned, we're not expecting that for today. We're expecting more in the form of some straight line wind gusts, definitely not up to 100 miles per hour, but maybe close to 55, maybe even 60 miles per hour in some of those stronger storms. But as far as that heavy rainfall rate, that hail rate, and especially that tornado threat go for today, basically zero with those storms that move through. Here's a little bit more on what we're expecting for the rest of this afternoon and evening.
And yeah, luckily not really all that much of a severe threat for today, although it's not zero. Now, the tornado threat is very, very low, as I just explained right there, but it's still going to be one of those days where you want to remain weather aware, especially if you are doing anything outside. Now, a look from the Storm Prediction Center does have us under that level 1 risk, or a marginal risk, for severe weather and severe weather development. Essentially, what this means is that it's not expecting every single storm to become strong to severe, but this is simply just indicating the possibility for maybe one or two of those storms making their way into the region to maybe pack a little bit of a punch. But you notice that marginal risk isn't issued for places like Danville, South Boston, and over toward Lynchburg. There is a good reason for that. I'll talk more about it here in a couple of minutes. But the Storm Prediction Center, they usually come out with severe risks, but they also break down that severe risk into 3 different categories. You look at a damaging wind risk, you look at a large hail risk, and you look at a tornado risk. And I'll talk about each 3 of them right here. Damaging wind risk, like I said, possible, but not likely. You notice it's in that lightest blue color, mostly aligning with that marginal risk. Again, just kind of indicating the slight possibility of 1 or 2 storms, maybe packing some gusty winds, maybe up to 50 to 55, not completely ruling out maybe up to 60 miles per hour. Now, if severe thunderstorm wind gusts do get up to 60 miles per hour, that is when the National Weather Service will drop that severe thunderstorm warning, so you can be sure to keep it tuned to WDBJ7 this evening, and we'll be sure to update you guys as things develop here within the next several hours. But that large hail risk not issued for anywhere in our viewing area. If you look up toward the far top of your screen, you notice it's issued up toward the north part of West Virginia up into Ohio, but As far as the hail chance here, not really a whole lot of instability. These clouds probably aren't going to be all that tall, so we're not worried about any super large hail or really almost any hail at that. And then, like I said, tornado risk, simply given that there isn't any wind shear in the atmosphere for today, that tornado risk is basically zero. Luckily, not much to worry about in that department. But now I'm going to show you the dew point forecast because you might remember me saying a couple of times, instability is probably one of the #1 ingredients for storms to need when it comes to storm development. Now, when you see a big gap between dew points and air temperatures, in today's case, dew points down into the 40s and air temperatures up into the 70s, that's how you know that there's not really all that much moisture in the air. But if you want a more of a widespread, strong storm outbreak, you'd like to see those dew points more into the 60s, more realistically the mid to upper 60s and even the 70s in some of those more extreme cases. But that's not going to be the case for today. At max, probably the low to mid 50s, so that's why we're not really worried about that much of a severe chance for today, simply given that there won't be all that much instability and all that much moisture for these storms to work with. And then obviously that cold front comes through tonight, bringing drier air behind it, and that's going to drop those dew points. So dew points and overall instability almost directly correlated. Now I'm going to show you the instability, or for lack of a better term, storm fuel that we're going to see as that cold front moves through, starting from right now and going into this evening. As that cold front approaches and eventually makes its way through, there will still be a little bit of instability or a little bit of storm fuel for these storms to work with, but you notice it's not all that much. That's why maybe some heavy downpours and some localized gusty winds is really all we're worried about with some of these storms that move through. But obviously, that cold front is going to make its way all the way through the region later this evening and into the night. And you notice along that cold front, not really all that much instability past 10 or 11 o'clock. The only reason for that is simply because the sun goes down and we lose that daytime heating. Now, taking a look at tonight's forecast, we are going to see some cool temperatures, probably down into the 40s across most of the region, maybe even a couple degrees cooler than what we woke up to early this morning. Now, you do notice that 40% chance for precipitation. Those are the storms I just talked about, talking about those late evening into the early night storms, but after midnight I do think that we're going to calm back down and see some drier conditions enter the region, and that's going to set for a much cooler and much drier day tomorrow. Highs on Thursday maybe not getting out of the 50s in a lot of hometowns, and even if they do, it's not going to be much warmer than that, only topping out in the low to mid 60s for those warmer locations, but much warmer weather is back on the way. This cool down is not going to last all that long at all. We'll be right back into the mid 70s by the day on Friday, along with a lot of sunshine to go around, and that's going to transition us into that next big thing we're giving you the first alert on, which will be a significant heat up going into the weekend. We're going to be talking about 80s returning to the forecast by Saturday, potentially 90s for a few hometowns, including right here in Roanoke, as soon as Sunday, if not by early next week. So some big swings in temperatures expected here over the next couple of days. Be sure to stick around, and after the commercial break, I'll take you through a full look of that first alert hometown forecast, including that Super 7-day forecast. All right, welcome back into your First Alert Hometown Weather Show. We're going to see a little bit of everything here over the next couple of days. Talking about some storms later today, talking about some pretty cool temperatures tonight and going into tomorrow, and then we're going to be feeling like full-fledged summer by this weekend, if not definitely by next week. But as far as right now goes, we're seeing some pretty cloudy conditions across some parts of the region, including right here in Roanoke. You can see off toward the west, it is looking cloudier and cloudier. There's a line of showers that's making their way into some parts of the area right now, kind of just northwest of the I-81 corridor. But some of these showers could very well make their way into the city here within the next hour or so. Something to keep in mind if you are heading out and about. Maybe take it a little bit easier on those roadways if you do run into some showers out and about. But current temperatures looking pretty comfortable into the low to mid 70s in some of those warmer locations, if not the mid to upper 60s. 74 right now in Roanoke, 73 in Lynchburg, as well as Martinsville, which is right around where we should be this time of year. Now, a current look at satellite and radar, you can see what I mean looking at those showers making their way into some parts of the area. Now, not really a stormy environment as of right now. This is actually ahead of the main cold front that we're keeping track of. That, as of right now, is still draped across Ohio, just now making its way into New York and Pennsylvania. But you can see a couple of severe warnings issued up toward the north of us. Now, not really all that much of a severe chance later today, but it's not completely ruled out that we could see some gusty winds with one or two of those storms that make their way into parts of the region. I will say, if anybody's more likely to maybe see that possibility of a severe warning, it's going to be farther north and farther west. But a current look at winds, a little bit breezy outside right now at about 10 to 15 miles per hour in a lot of hometowns, mostly out of the southwest and the west. And it's those southwesterly winds that are indicating that we haven't seen that front move through yet. Once that front comes in and moves through from the northwest, those winds are going to pick up from the same direction out of the northwest, and that's why we're going to be a lot cooler for tonight and throughout the day tomorrow. But a look at your evening commute cast. Do keep in mind that if you're heading home from work, maybe if you're heading out and about to go to dinner, maybe if you're going grocery shopping, you could run into a heavy downpour here and there. If you do end up running into some of that heavy rain, it should not last all that long, but it could fall heavily enough for a short period of time to maybe create some ponding on those roadways. Just something to keep in the back of your mind if you are heading out here in a few hours. But I showed this a few minutes ago. I'm going to show it again in case you missed it. That marginal risk issued for about half the region, farther north and farther west, like I just said, a little bit more likely. In fact, I'm hesitant to use the word likely. You're going to see the highest quote-unquote possibility of some gusty winds here and there. But farther east and farther south, that severe chance does diminish a little bit. But in case you're hoping for a soaking widespread rain like what we saw this past Monday, unfortunately, probably not going to be the case. Not everybody's going to see rain out of this event. General rain chances are also going to favor areas along and north of the I-81 corridor. Now, the storms are going to last at the latest until about 9 or 10 o'clock tonight. Those will move out, and that's going to give way to drier and cooler conditions going into your Wednesday night. Still cool enough to warrant a light jacket on your way out the door tomorrow, and unfortunately, tomorrow's highs aren't going to be all that much warmer, topping out only in the upper 50s and low 60s because of those northwest winds staying steady out of the northwest at about 15 to 20, maybe even 25 miles per hour. That's going to continue to pump in that cooler air into the region. So not only will you probably need a jacket during the morning, but maybe even during the afternoon as well. It's one of those situations where, yes, 61 sounds comfortable, but when you factor in a 15 to 20 mile an hour wind, it still feels quite chilly outside. But as far as rain chances, not talking about that for tomorrow. We are looking to remain dry for the most part for tomorrow, Friday, and going into the weekend. And I will say, summertime fans, you guys are going to enjoy this weekend 100% because we're going to see those temperatures rapidly crank up by Saturday and Sunday. We'll be talking about 80s returning to the forecast for Saturday, and then especially as we head into Saturday night, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, we're really going to start to see that southerly flow, and that's going to bring the potential for not only above average highs, but maybe the possibility for some record highs as well. If I can remember correctly, Sunday's record high is 92 degrees. Our forecast is 90, so it's going to be feeling like the middle of July by the time we hit Sunday and Monday this week. You can see a look at that Super 7-day forecast showing those. I'm reluctant to call it warm temperatures. I think we can call them hot temperatures at this point in time. Our first potential multi-day stretch of some highs in the 90s of 2026 going into the second half of this weekend and into early next week. So for those pool lovers, I think Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday looking like fantastic days for going to the pool. Now you do notice that we have tacked on a 20% chance for some rainfall during the day on Saturday. It's going to be a day where we're not expecting any particular system to bring us a widespread chance of rain, but it is going to be so humid that one or two isolated storms won't be out of the question. But generally speaking, rain chances are going to remain to our west and to our north when this event does happen this weekend. So looking pretty dry here for the next several days after we get through these storms this weekend. Brief cool down on Thursday before we see those summertime temperatures return going into the weekend and into early next week, potentially even into late next week as well. But like I said, the main story today will be the storms making their way in later on. We'll have continuous updates on our WDBJ7 weather app as well as on WDBJ7. Chief Meteorologist Justin Povick will have nonstop updates from 3 all the way until 6:30. So be sure to tune into that, and be sure to tune into your First Alert Hometown show right here on WDBJ7 Plus every day at 1:30 in the afternoon, where you can receive exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. But for now, I'm your host, meteorologist Tanner Brammer. Be sure to have a great rest of your Wednesday and a great rest of your week.